In this episode, we talk about the Delhi building collapse and the undergoing rescue efforts. We also talk about Pope Francis' demise. But first, we talk about the Jal Jeevan Mission and its implications. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. Back in 2019 on Independence Day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Jal Jeevan Mission, a plan to provide tap connections to about 16 crore rural households by the end of 2024.
हम आने वाले दिनों में जल जीवन मिशन को लेकर के आगे बढ़ेंगे। ये जल जीवन मिशन, इसके लिए करीब केंद्र और राज्य साथ मिलकर के काम करेंगे और आने वाले वर्षों में 3.5 लाख करोड़ रुपए से भी ज्यादा रकम इस जल जीवन मिशन के लिए खर्च करने का हमने संकल्प किया।
The idea was that every rural household should have a tap connection. This was a crucial undertaking, not only to provide one of the most basic necessities to millions in India, but also to create a significant social impact.
This program is not going to have impacts not only on women, because in many parts of our country, women members are supposed to fetch water from distant sources, but it will also have another social implication.
That's the Indian Express's Harikishan Sharma.
There have been instances that a particular community would fetch water from a particular well because other communities are not allowed to even touch or even come closer to that well. But now in this program, the same pipe is providing water to all members of society, irrespective of their caste and their religion or their creed or their community. The same pipe is providing water to all people. So in a way, it is bringing a kind of, social justice that was due for many years or many decades.
Now, according to the original plan, the mission was to be completed by the end of 2024. But so far, only 75% of the target has been achieved, and the remaining 4 crore tap connections are now expected to be installed by the end of 2028. However, today we are not focusing on this delay. Instead, we are looking at the cost of completing the mission, because initially, the cost of this mission was supposed to be 3.6 lakh crore rupees, but that figure has now nearly tripled to 9.1 lakh crore rupees. And this is what has led a government committee to recommend a major budget cut to the mission, one that could significantly affect how much states will ultimately have to contribute to the scheme. To discuss what this committee has said and its implications for the mission, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to Harikishan in the segment.
Hari, from 3.6 lakh crore rupees, which was decided in the beginning, to now 9.1 lakh crore rupees after 4 years into this mission. Could you put this into context? Like, how big of a jump is that for a government scheme?
So, Shashank, this budgetary outlay of rupees 3,60,000 crore, at that time, though it was approved by the cabinet, it was approved by the Expenditure Finance Committee, they approved the outlay, but the estimated amount which was proposed by the Jal Shakti Ministry, which runs this program, which implement this program, at that time also, in August 2019, they had estimated that providing tap water connection to each and every rural household will cost you something about rupees 8 lakh crore. Precisely the figure that was proposed by the Jal Shakti Ministry at that time was rupees 7.88 lakh crore. But despite the Jal Shakti Ministry, the nodal ministry which run this program, proposing a higher allocation, the finance ministry at that time, they reduced their proposed outlay considerably and they just approved rupees 3.6 lakh crore. So in a way, when we look the figure, as you mentioned, that this program was approved at rupees 3.6 lakh crore, but now the proposed cost is 9 lakh crore. This shows a 3 times hike. But if you look this figure in context with the earlier estimates, then there is just hike of rupees 1 lakh crore.
But Hari, why such a big difference? Because we are talking about almost 3 times that amount, right? So how does the mission account for that difference, and a difference that it had flagged in the beginning itself?
There are two things. One is estimate and another thing is actual. Okay. Once you launch a scheme, many factors comes in play. For instance, one is inflation, which is natural. So the inflation of different items which are being used. And in this case, the most costly item is pipes. So the cost of pipes increased very significantly in last 5 years. Okay. And then, you estimated it at 47,000 rupees. This was the average cost. But once you go for tendering and you go for real implementation on the ground, you might come across that the actual cost is way much higher than what you had expected at the time of the planning and designing of the scheme.
Okay, so one thing is inflation, the price of things increasing over time. And the other thing is the actual cost of things being higher than your estimates. And this is something that the finance ministry has flagged. Tell us, what do we know about this specific increase?
So, under this mission, the broad structure is like this. The center gives financial support, but all the works, the schemes, are approved by the state government at state level. So what they do, first they would plan a scheme, then they would approve the budget of that scheme, and then they will go for tendering. So suppose you are providing tap water connections in 10 villages in Madhya Pradesh, and at the planning of that scheme, you come out with a proposal that will cost you, say, rupees 10 crore to provide tap water connection in those 10 villages. But when you approve this rupees 10 crore figure and go for tendering, and you discover that the contractor has proposed that I will do this work for rupees 11 crore or 12 crore. So what several states did, they said, okay, you are allowed to do this work at rupees 12 crore. Means you allowed a contractor to do that work at a 25% higher rate. So that was another reason apart from the inflation. So in infrastructure projects, cost overrun and time overrun takes place. So this pattern we have also seen in Jal Jeevan Mission.
Right. And the other thing that listeners should know is that under the scheme, the center and state share funds in a 50-50 ratio. Center pays half and states pay half. And now recently, it was the Expenditure Finance Committee that was looking at all this expenditure. And the Expenditure Finance Committee, of course, which comes under the Ministry of Finance, looks at projects which are worth over 500 crore rupees, and it makes its recommendations. So talk about what recommendations has it made now after the mission approached it to increase its budget, to increase its size.
So they approached the EFC, the Jal Shakti Ministry approached the EFC for an approval of rupees 9,10,000 crore for the Jal Jeevan Mission. And this 9,10,000 crore was for the mission from the beginning of the mission in 2019 till 2028. And out of that, they said that you have already provided us 3.6 lakh crore. So they said that we need another central support. And Jal Shakti Ministry proposed that we should be given 2,79,000 crore rupees for the next 4 years. But EFC said that we are not going to provide you that much money. We will provide you only 1.51 lakh crore rupees. That is, about 46% lower than the amount demanded by Jal Shakti Ministry. But you see, why the EFC came to this 1.51 lakh crore figure is a very surprising. While calculating this figure, this support, they said we stick to the cost norm set in 2019. So they ignored even the genuine increase, because if you are restricting proposal to rupees 47,000 per tap connection, then you are ignoring genuine inflation also, which has taken place. Forget the rest factors, as I mentioned, like tender premium and other things. They also ignored the inflation.
So let's say hypothetically, if the mission does not get their new budget approved and they follow the recommendations of this committee, which says that, we are not going to give more money to the center for this, would the states have to bear the cost then?
Yes, there would be implication for states. For instance, I give you an example. States like Bihar, which is going to see elections later this year. Tamil Nadu, which will see elections next year. Assam, UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, they will all see a major revenue implication due to reduction in central funding. Because what will happen, for instance, Bihar, they approved schemes after the Jal Jeevan Mission's term was completed. I mean, they approved schemes after March 2024. So this EFC has recommended clearly that we are not going to support those schemes. And these schemes are worth rupees 7,000 crore. So for a state like Bihar, which is financially very poor state, and it needs support from the center, the amount of rupees 7,000 crore is huge. It's not easy for a state like Bihar. And 3 states like UP, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, they would have a combined impact of rupees 50,000 crore. This is what sources have told us. So it will really burden states with additional spending, because this is not something you are going to implement in the future. These are the projects already approved by the states. Already tenders have taken place for them. Already some money has been spent. So you cannot change cost midway. So as an observer, it looks very illogical to think over it, because they have maintained 2019 cost criteria and approved the amount, central support amount for the next 4 years.
And in that sense, this is puzzling, because then one could allege that, although you had proposed that the cost is going to be 50-50, you are now finding a way for states to pay more.
So if you want to do that, you come out with revised guidelines, say that, okay, we are going to support you only 30%, 70% you bear. But they are not saying this also. They are saying that we will give you 50% our support and 50% your support. So in that case, the program would end up incomplete, because with that amount, Jal Shakti Ministry estimate that with rupees 1.51 lakh crore, you are not going to complete this mission. So that is one. And what has happened, in a sense, the center is also realizing its mistakes it made over the last 5 years. The first mistake is that they didn't oversee this program very closely. They didn't monitor this very effectively. That resulted in approval of many schemes by states, even without the knowledge of the center. They allowed a kind of free run to states. So I think in the entire issue, the center is also equally responsible, because they have not effectively monitored the program and not effectively ensured that this is implemented in a very financially prudential manner.
And Hari, although this committee has recommended these budget cuts, these are only recommendations. The ministry can still approve a higher budget, right?
Yes, you rightly mentioned, the EFC is just a recommendatory body. It only appraises projects and recommends to the cabinet. Now, the Jal Shakti Ministry has 3 options. One, they can approach at political level, like Jal Shakti Minister can write to Finance Minister, and they can resolve the issue at ministerial level. If they are not able to resolve this issue, then there is a mechanism under Cabinet Secretary. The officers of Jal Shakti Ministry, they can approach Cabinet Secretariat and ask time from Cabinet Secretary and urge him to resolve this interministerial issue. And then Cabinet Secretary can call officials from these 2 ministries, Finance and Jal Shakti, and can resolve this issue. Then the third option is, the Union Cabinet is supreme. So even without exercising these 2 options, Jal Shakti Ministry can approach the Union Cabinet and can present their views there and can ask for more funding, and Cabinet can overrule the EFC. This has happened in past, and this can also happen in future.
And next we talk about the Delhi building collapse. In the early hours of Saturday, 28th of April, a building collapsed in Mustafabad, a densely populated area in northeast Delhi. The collapse ended up killing 11 people, including 3 children and 8 members of a single family.
So at around 2:50 am on Saturday, a building in the Mustafabad area collapsed, which had ground plus 3 floors on that. So it's a total of 4 floors.
This is the Indian Express's Pragynesh, who reported on the story for the newspaper.
And 3 different families were living in that building. On the first floor was the owner's family, which incidentally, like the guy who owns the building, Tehseen, is also the father of one of the deceased in the northeast Delhi riots. So his family was on the first floor. Other 2 floors were rented out. On the second floor was one family of which had the brothers Tanish and Naved, who were the deceased. And on the third floor, we had Reshma's family. So at around 2:50 a.m., because there was a lot of thunderstorm in Delhi, of course it was not the primary reason for that, but because of a weakened structure, those thunderstorms led to the collapse of the building, and 11 people died in it and other 11 were injured.
The building had reportedly been constructed nearly 20 years ago, and according to officials, there was some construction work going on at the ground floor of the building.
Now, what the police have said in their official statement is that it was being done for creating some space for shops. Now, a lot of the reasons that have been attributed to this loss have been hearsay, but all in all, from NDRF and the police, the statement has come that when the shops were being constructed on the ground floor, one of the pillars was demolished, a pillar which was at the front of the building. So from the base of the building, that pillar was connected to the structure of the building. So they demolished that pillar from the front to create more space, and they were trying to make another pillar on the back to compensate for it. So that pillar was under construction. But while it was under construction, the building was standing on one less pillar. Because of that, when the storms came, and because it was in a small area, what happened was a pancake collapse. So all the floors just fell on top of each other, which made this way more fatal than it could have been if it was not a pancake collapse.
And Pragesh, after the collapse, there were these 22 people who were trapped inside. 11 of them died later. But you spoke with the officials who were involved in the rescue operation. What did they have to say about the challenges in the process? And how long did it take?
So it took more than 12 hours for the rescue ops to finish. And the main reason that it took so long was, first, that those lanes in which this colony is situated is very congested. It is so congested that the NDRF could not even get a dumper inside it. So a dumper is basically a machine which could have picked up concrete in bulks and removed it quickly. Because of the narrowness of the lanes, it could not come in, which just delayed the process so much, because then NDRF personnel manually, along with multiple locals there, and I have to mention it, that all the people in the area, they were helping the NDRF personnel, and they were manually picking up concrete and moving it outside the area because the dumper could not come. So of course that process is going to take so much more longer than a machine would do it. The second problem was that because it was a pancake collapse, as I explained earlier, the floors, instead of going left, right and center, they collapsed on top of each other. Because of that, the hubris was very thick. Now what happens that usually NDRF has a machine which is called a through wall detector. You usually put that through wall detector on a wall and you could see what's on the other side of the wall. But it only works for a certain thickness of the concrete or the wall. Because all the floors had fallen on top of each other, the thickness of the debris on top of the victims was such that even the through wall detectors could not see that where the bodies were located or where the people were trapped. So it made also they could not target it, that from where we have to remove it first and from where we have to do it later. So that also costed a lot of lives. The third problem was, again, because of the narrowness, the ambulance was not able to move as fast as it usually should. People were putting the bodies in, and then the police had to go inside the lanes and clear out the crowd, and it took good 8 to 10 minutes just to prepare the lane for the ambulance to go through. And in these kind of situations, these things could be a matter of life and death.
Right, and during your reportage, you also spoke to the families who were affected. So what did they have to say about the events leading up to this collapse?
So they were pretty unsuspecting about such an incident, if such a thing could happen. They have been living there for the past 12-15 years, and till now it has been perfectly fine. The shops were, of course, being commissioned by the owner of the building, and in order to expand the area, that pillar had been demolished. But they never thought that it would actually lead to the collapse of the building. And at that time, one of the families which was living on rent of Danish and Naveed, the two brothers, they were saving up for the marriage of Danish and his sister Neha. And because these families are lower middle class families, they had all their savings in gold and cash, which they had all put in their house only. Because of the collapse, all that is gone. Of course, Danish and Naveed are no more also. And most of the remaining members of the family, of all three families, are left to fend for themselves.
And you also write that not just this building, but even the others in the locality are unauthorized. So can you tell us what this means and its prevalence in the city?
So an unauthorized construction is more like that. There are certain parameters that you need to follow before constructing a house on a piece of land. How much area it should be constructed, how much gap there should be between two buildings, how wide the lanes should be in the area. So unauthorized construction is when you construct a house or you construct a building without following these parameters set out by authorities, specifically in this case MCD. So even if you are constructing an extra floor, you have to take prior permission. But in these kind of areas, shops are being constructed, balconies are being added, buildings are being widened to cover more and more area of the lanes and the roads. And all this is done without any prior permission. So it becomes unauthorized in the sense that you don't have the necessary permission to expand your building. You are not following the norms that are required to be there in order to properly construct a building. And let's be honest, Delhi is a city of unauthorized colonies. This is just the way it has been since refugee colonies started to prop up. So it's a common problem in Delhi, and because these colonies are unauthorized and because there is no such official monitoring of these places, these buildings usually come up in very small patches of areas with very little gap between them. So there was also an incident there where there was a JCB crane which was trying to remove the concrete, but it had to move and adjust multiple times because a little bit to the left and the machine would hit another building which was just 100 meters apart from the building that had fallen off. So these kind of colonies usually, the MCD doesn't get involved in that much monitoring of these places. They are not vigilant about it, and it's only when these kind of incidents happen, which has been a lot of times in Delhi, that we see statements about an inquiry would be done, this and that. But these colonies just continue to function the way they have. There are a lot of people there, and it would require a lot of relocation, which the authorities try to avoid.
And after this collapse, what kinds of structural surveys or emergency inspections are now being considered in the nearby areas?
They have said every time such things happen, they say that inspections would be done and efforts would be undertaken, reports would be prepared, and all the bureaucratic language that you get to hear. But as of now, there hasn't been any concrete plan on how to solve the problem of unauthorized colonies in the capital.
Right, and both the Chief Minister and the Prime Minister have responded to the collapse. So what action has been promised in terms of investigation and accountability?
Yeah, so now since the new government has come in, now this incident has again become a war of words between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP. So what the BJP is saying and what the ministers, including Kapil Mishra and the CM, are saying, that action would be taken against officials who were in charge of this area, the MCD officials, and how they could have let such a colony flourish in front of them. So yes, there is a lot of talk about heads would roll and all that, but as of now there hasn't been any concrete plan by the government on what to do about this and what to do about unauthorized colonies in general in the capital.
And Pragynesh, could you also speak on the current status of the 11 people who were injured during the collapse?
I spoke to the police. They told me that out of the 11 injured people, some 4 to 5 have been discharged, but most of them continue to remain in the hospital and still struggling for their lives. Not all of them are critical, but a couple of family members of Danish and Naved's family who are already deceased. His father, he is still critical, and updates on other people would come by evening today. But as of now, no extra deaths have happened. The number remains at 11, and other people are undergoing treatment.
And lastly, have there been any announcements of relief measures or temporary shelters for the affected families?
There hasn't been any official announcement of some shelter-like situation for them. But yes, I am pretty sure that the government will come up with some kind of relief package or some kind of compensation for the families.
And in the end, we talk about Pope Francis. The Vatican announced yesterday that Pope Francis has passed away at the age of 88. He died at his residence just a day after delivering his final public address on Easter Sunday. The announcement was made by Cardinal Kevin Farrell, an official of the Holy Church, who confirmed that Pope died at 7:30 a.m., bringing to a close a papacy that began in March 2013 when he succeeded Pope Benedict XVI. Born George Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis was the first Latin American pope and the first Jesuit to lead the Roman Catholic Church. His passing marks the beginning of sede vacante, Latin for the seat is vacant, a period of transition until a new pope is elected. While his funeral will follow traditional rites in line with his personal wishes, Francis will not be buried in the Vatican crypt. Instead, he will be laid to rest at the Basilica of Saint Mary Major in Rome. The conclave to elect his successor is expected to begin 15 to 20 days after his passing. The Pope's last public appearance came just a day earlier when he addressed a crowd of over 35,000 gathered in St. Peter's Square. Despite a recent hospitalization for double pneumonia, he surprised many by appearing in the Pope Mobile waving to thousands and offering one last Easter message. Brothers and sisters, Happy Easter.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua.
Condolences have poured in from across the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed grief, describing Francis as a beacon of compassion and spiritual courage. French President Emmanuel Macron recalled his empathy for the most vulnerable, while King Charles of the United Kingdom said he was deeply saddened. US President Donald Trump also paid tribute on his social media platform Truth Social, posting, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis." Leaders from Israel, Germany, and the Philippines echoed similar sentiments. Francis' papacy was marked by a distinct tone which was open, informal, and often rooted in plain speech. From his first words as Pope, "Brothers and sisters, good evening," to his informal quote, "Who am I to judge?" in response to a question about homosexuality, Francis brought a more personal and pastoral voice to the papacy. He often mixed Spanish and Italian, creating a unique style of address. Francis introduced a wave of reform in Vatican focusing on transparency, financial accountability, and inclusion by appointing more women to senior roles. He also took steps to address the Church's sexual abuse crisis by holding senior clergy accountable, though some felt he did not go far enough. He also allowed blessings for same-sex couples, welcomed transgender people into church life, and made efforts to address social justice. His attempts at reform, however, met resistance within the church hierarchy, and his approach drew criticism from conservative circles, especially in the United States. However, Francis maintained that engaging with a changing world through social justice, climate advocacy, and dialogue was central to the church's mission. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.